South Korea, of course, has a very kind of special relationship with the United States because Korea used to be one country, one independent country until the early 20th century, and then was occupied by Japan, became its colony, and was liberated from Japanese rule, uh, half by the US and half by the USSR. So the southern part became a very important the element in the US the military and security strategy in East Asia. We still have US Army stationed in the country, and yeah, I mean it has had a lot of love-hate relationship with the US. Now, in the beginning, of course, that you could say that we had this division between North and South, not because we wanted it, but because the great powers, the Soviet Union and the US, wanted it. So you could say that it was not our doing, and therefore whatever happened after that is all the US and Soviet responsibilities. But apart from that grand historical perspective, in the 1950s, especially after the Korean War, where North Korea tried to take over South Korea and failed, the South Korea is very dependent on the American foreign aid. So throughout the 50s, the South Korean economy would have collapsed without US aid. But then from the 60s, the country started to walk its own path. I mean, even while having to be a kind of having to be subject to the global military strategy of the US, economically, the country started walking a more independent path. I mean, of course, given its political relationship with the US, it had to give lip service to its commitment to capitalism and free enterprise and so on. But throughout the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we had, well, largely the military rule, but the rule by this group of elites, which, I mean, while being part of the US the global security system, wanted economic independence. So it started developing. I mentioned the case of South Korean automobile industry, which was a joke in the 1960s. Same story goes with our steel industry, shipbuilding industry. When South Korea first tried to develop all these high technology industries in the 1960s and 70s, a lot of people laughed at it. Many foreign advisors, including American advisors, said that all of these are insane. So in that sense, the US didn't help South Korea pursue this strategy. But in another sense, of course, the US was crucial in South Korean economic development because it was a main source of new technologies. It was the main export market for a long time. Now China is the biggest export market, but until the 90s, the US was the largest export market, and a lot of South Koreans studied science and engineering in the US. So in that broader sense, it was a very important source of what made South Korea what it is today. But in terms of supporting what it was doing in terms of economic policy and so on, I think South Korea had to kind of be very kind of cautious in kind of not revealing too much to the US, because the US always had the taste for more free market oriented policies. And I'm not saying that it was totally opposed to what it was doing, but in many instances, the US wasn't too happy with what South Korea was doing. But I keep telling people that we were actually following the ultimate US model, the idea of infant industry protection, proposed the first by Alexander Hamilton. This idea that you need to protect and nurture your young industries before they become internationally competitive. That is quintessentially American idea. So a lot of people accuse me of being anti-American when I say positive things about protectionist development strategies of South Korea in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But then I keep telling those people that actually it was the only following what the US did in the 19th century.